welcome everybody to this episode of Freedom Hub Working Group. I am your host, Jeff Cantor, along with my co-host, Charles Frohman. We are here sponsored by your Freedom Hub as usual, and we are uniting all the activists and entrepreneurial disruptors for sure that are out there in the world. And boy, we need them more than ever these days. All of these programs are recorded, so please be aware that they're available at all these channels. I'll show you one here momentarily. The top link is the one to register. We release a new one every week with a different link for you to register at, but this is the standard one. These are all of the locations. We're on BitChute, Brighty on YouTube. These are case sensitive as they are Bitly's. So you'll be able to go there, and there's a host of shows you'll want to share over time, absolutely, as far as that goes. So please share the links, join, have a great time with all the stuff that's on there. So as usual, today we got a great talk, and we've had millions of other great ones too. So please take a look at all these old ones. Now we actually have a new sponsor yet today, and this is pretty exciting news too. Heaven Sent Hemp. So what we found out about this particular program and why this is here, that more than 90% of the people that have tried this stuff have had unique energy relief, greater clarity. It's fantastic. There's a variety of different products. They're offering it as a combo pack for all of our members, and here's how you'll be able to go there. You're going to want to go to heavensenthemp.com, and if you use your Freedom Hub 4, because you're here at 4 o'clock Eastern, you're going to get 15% off anything on that site or off that bundle. And as opposed to taking 5 Hour Energy or any of the rest of the stuff, you're going to find this to be quite a dramatic change. Now, just to give you a flavor of some of those sites, as I mentioned, we do also operate a LinkedIn group, so please join. You'll see there's a lot of stuff, and you can see back here, we're talking about today's show and some of what's going on down the past, some great commentary and others that are participating. This is an example of some of the videos in his several years of videos, and there's as current as yesterday, all of these, frankly. And then here's the sponsor site. So when you come over here, you'll take a look at that. All right, very good. So let's get into today a little bit, because this, as I said, is a really exciting day. And so what we've got going on here is, let me open this up. Beautiful. Charles, would you please do the honors?
Sure. And we have other sponsors too that we can mention later on when Jeff wants to. But Alex McCobin is someone I got to know years ago in the Governor Gary Johnson campaign. He had co-founded a college group of libertarians. It was a nonpartisan group. It's about liberty, not campaigning for any partisan offices. But his members, his college students across the country were gung-ho for liberty. He really created a gigantic organization. It was so really well received that I can see why he got hired by John Mackey of Whole Foods and his compadres at Conscious Capitalism to run that organization. You know, I helped, by coincidence, found an earlier version of that called Flow with Michael Strong and John Mackey in the mid-2000s. But back then it was just more of an idea. Now it's a serious, huge group of Fortune 500 just trying to change the world and help capitalism improve its image and actual substantive behavior. And lucky for us, the COVID lockdown, unemployment, protests and riots, and people getting used to telecommuting has led, even in a poll I read about today, for families demanding change in the workplace. They are fed up in different ways, so who better than Alex McCobin to lead a discussion on how conscious capitalism can show a path for entrepreneurs and business owners to lead us out of the chaos into a better tomorrow. So that's what's up for today, Jeff.
Boy, that sounds fantastic. Well, Alex, I'm going to turn the controls over to you. And there you go.
Jeff and Charlie, thank you so much for inviting me to talk. I want to make this as engaging as possible, and I'm actually going to begin by asking you a question, Charlie. I did not know that you were involved in Flow back in the day. Can you tell me about that? Like, were you working on the initial projects with Michael Strong and Phyllis and them?
Yes, or actually you caught me in a lie, just kidding. So I'm not sure how we got connected, but it was Phyllis, Michael, and Jeff Klein's predecessor I helped recruit a lot of the attendees at maybe the second board meeting at John Mackey's ranch in 2005 or 6. And it was a great weekend. We brainstormed. We had some people were Democrats, Republicans, conscious entrepreneurs in the natural health space, regular industrialists. It was just every kind of person you can imagine. I taught Kundalini yoga to them at the John Mackey's ranch, which was cool. And then I barely lost to John Mackey in his Frisbee golf course at his ranch by 1 point. So good memories.
He's good. That's impressive to come within 1 point of him. Congrats.
It was good. We had events, and then I moved on. Michael Strong and Jeff Klein took it to new heights with new people. And so I really haven't connected with it since the mid-2000s. So I'm anxious to hear what you guys have done since then.
That is so cool. I'm excited. I'm so glad to hear that. And, the history of conscious capitalism is really informative for where we are right now. And my history with how I intersected with this, I think, is where I actually want to start, because I came about this almost as in an all roads lead to Rome kind of situation. And it'll be a great setup for what might be a rich conversation with us. I hope it will be. So my life changed when I turned 14, and my dad gave me a copy of Atlas Shrugged for my birthday. Over the course of a summer, or a month over that summer, I consumed it voraciously. I was hooked. I dedicated myself to learning more about objectivism and libertarianism throughout high school. And then when I went off to college, I thought I would be around other libertarians, other smart people. There must be other libertarians there. And this was 2004. And I was sorely mistaken. For the first 2 years, I thought I was the only one in the world with these views, and nearly gave up on them. I said to myself, boy, if I'm the only one who thinks this way, I might be crazy. I should just give up, become a socialist. But instead of doing that, I decided to give it one more shot and started a student group, the University of Pennsylvania Libertarian Association. And lo and behold, within a semester, we had over 200 members on our listserv, including professors. And it blew my mind. There were other people like this out there. We just needed an organization to bring us together. So the summer before my senior year, when I was interning in DC at the Reason Foundation, and I was meeting other libertarian students from other schools running their own groups, we decided to organize a small roundtable discussion on best practices for student organizing. From there, we decided to put on what we thought would be one-time person conference to keep that conversation going. And that led to the formation of Students for Liberty, that I ran for the next 10 years while I was working a full-time job at one point, then went to get a PhD in philosophy and kept working on Students for Liberty. And I had also started to run a few other for-profit and nonprofit organizations. There was always that interest in organizing for me, in building things and helping more people become leaders and lay the foundations for making a difference in their communities. And Students for Liberty today now includes over 2,000 student groups in over 100 countries, probably more than that actually, because those were the numbers when I left as the president 4 years ago. But while I was working on my PhD in philosophy, I was staying involved in the business side of things also. I was interested in business ethics. I was beginning to write a dissertation on a new theory of corporate moral responsibility. And while I began working on that, other business leaders like John Mackey from Whole Foods, Kip Tyndall from the Container Store, and many other luminaries, in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, were starting to come together and recognize that most people fundamentally misunderstand business, even business people themselves, where they either because they think it's the best thing in the world or the worst thing in the world. They think business is just about maximizing profit, making as much money as possible. When for these entrepreneurs, they didn't see business that way. They saw profit as being important. It's a driver for growth and success. But business exists to serve a higher purpose. That's why they created their businesses. That's why they got so many people involved in what they're doing. And they wanted to share that with the world. And that's what business and capitalism actually is all about, serving a higher purpose of helping more people flourish. And they got to a point where several different organizations that were working in this space, like Flow that Charlie was in, the Conscious Capitalism Institute, the Conscious Capitalism Association, all merged together to form Conscious Capitalism, Inc. as a nonprofit organization and publish a book encapsulating this philosophy, Conscious Capitalism, by John Mackey and Raj Sisodia, one of our other founders and board members. And when that came out in 2013, I was enamored by it. I went to the first Conscious Capitalism conference to learn more about what this meant, thinking I was going to do research for my dissertation, but ended up being so inspired by the business leaders I met there, realizing that they were doing everything that I believed in and needed to be done in the world, not just reading and writing about this stuff like I was preparing to do in philosophy, but actually going and creating businesses that were making the world better, representing capitalism and the best of capitalism, the way that I wanted to see more business leaders do for years. And it inspired me to not finish the PhD and instead focus myself on Students for Liberty for a few years. What my way of building up a business and nonprofit one at that, to make a difference and to do it in a conscious capitalist way. And 4 years ago, when conscious capitalism was reaching an inflection point, when this movement that had been building for a decade and a half, back in the early 2000s with Flow and more, when it was really reaching an inflection point to be either become a movement or stay in a relatively small size, I was invited to become co-CEO at the time and then CEO, and it was the one thing that could have taken me away from Students for Liberty, because we need business leaders to change the practice and perception of capitalism. We need the capitalists to lead this. And that had been missing for a long time. And that's one of the greatest opportunities to create a flourishing world for people. And what I want to say now is to tie more in this larger movement of what's happening and what that means, because we are reaching a tipping point with this in a way that I did not expect to happen so quickly. When John Mackey, but back in the 2005, John Mackey debated Milton Friedman about conscious capitalism before there was even the name conscious capitalism. He was debating whether the purpose of business is to maximize profit. And as Milton said, the social responsibility of business is to maximize profit. And at the time, what John was saying and what other conscious capitalists were saying was considered radical. It was being laughed out of boardrooms and conference tables. But a couple of years ago, we started to see things really start to shift. And one of the big changes was when the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, the largest investment firm in the world, make an announcement that CEOs that they invest in need to look to the long term, and they need to have a higher purpose and take care of all their stakeholders, not just their shareholders. Then last year, we saw the Business Roundtable come out with its new statement on the purpose of a corporation, not just being to maximize profit and serve shareholders, but to serve all stakeholders. And then we even saw the World Economic Forum at Davos earlier this year come out with its own manifesto to create a cohesive and sustainable world through stakeholder capitalism, basically the same thing as conscious capitalism. And when the coronavirus crisis hit, a lot of people began to wonder whether all of these businesses, all of these nice statements that were coming out from businesses about the need for a higher purpose and stakeholder orientation, for us, conscious leadership and conscious cultures in businesses, would stick, or if they give it up in order to just survive. And what we're actually seeing now, as Alan Murray, the editor at Fortune magazine, has been writing about the daily, is that businesses are doubling down on this. They now recognize that in order to create a sustainable business, to fulfill their purpose, they need to have stakeholder orientation. They need to think bigger than profit. And none of this is to say profit's bad. It's a great thing, but it's not the purpose of a business. It's the means of supporting the business doing something better. And now, in the wake of the United States really wrestling in a bigger way than it ever has before with the problems of systemic racism, we're also seeing CEOs stepping up in an even bigger way, recognizing this as a problem and talking about how they're going to address this too. It's another indication that across the board, businesses are recognizing the need for them to be moral leaders in society in a lot of ways, to not just focus on profit, and through that really fulfill the potential of capitalism, of creating win-win-win solutions, lifting all boats so that everyone does better, when an overemphasis on profit to the exclusion and to the hurt of other stakeholders doesn't work. And what I'll share here as well with everyone is just a few thoughts as to why this really matters for libertarians, because I actually get pushback from libertarians on this, perhaps more than other groups, especially now that so many business leaders are coming along this path. But it's critical in my mind that libertarians start to understand and embrace conscious capitalism. Because over the last 200 years, I don't need to tell all of you the benefits of capitalism to humanity, how it has led to the near elimination of extreme poverty. It's raised the average income of individuals across the world. Life expectancy has more than doubled. Literacy is up. We've got 7+ billion people when Malthus back in the day thought we couldn't do more than a few hundred million. But the perception of capitalism is so bad. People still, as we all see, think of business as just greedy, destructive, exploitative individuals. And why is that? Well, for one, the arguments for capitalism that libertarians have used in the past explicitly said that. And we're wrong for doing that, frankly. This is a little heretical here, especially since I just said that I came to all of this through Ayn Rand initially, and I have a tremendous respect for Milton Friedman. But when you say the selfishness is a virtue, and when you say the social responsibility of business is to maximize profit, you're literally saying business and business people don't care about others. That's not only the wrong way to present it, it's not true. I even think that Rand and Friedman had deeper points to make. These were in some ways the first versions of clickbait back in the day, but it's what people understand capitalism and business people to mean. Same thing then goes with neoclassical economic theory and the agency theory of management that I think are off, but I'm not going to go into that here. What I will also say is that in addition to the arguments for capitalism that have been offered that have turned people away, the experience of business has turned them away as well. Dilbert comic strip resonates with people because they have seen business as being nothing but drudgery, as something that's soul crushing, that they can't get away, they can't wait to get away from. It should not be surprising if that's the case, that they disagree with capitalism. You know, Fred Kaufman, the author of the book Conscious Business, grew up under the Argentinian dictatorship. He has no love for authoritarian regimes. But he is right to point out that there are no death camps in corporations, but many apparently successful companies hide great suffering in their basements. And that's something that business needs to not only reckon with, but actively work against, because the point of business is to make people's lives better. It's value for value exchange. It's uplifting and elevating people. And if it's not doing that, it's not serving its purpose. And I'll end here by giving another heretical and provocative statement, which is that, you know, I was actively involved in the explicit libertarian community for a long time. And philosophically, I'm still there. But I think it's incredibly important for us to really wrestle with what we actually stand for with that philosophy, and not just how it's presented, but the substance behind it, and the way that we articulate that. Because libertarianism does not mean maximizing profit. It means free association of individuals, and it's supposed to be something that helps more people flourish. And I am I am less interested in having a title applied to me nowadays, and then making an impact and helping more people lead free and flourishing lives and creating a world of harmony and prosperity. And freedom gets us there, more important, and capitalism gets us there. But more importantly, it's capitalism practiced the right way. It's a conscious capitalism. And we're seeing the world come around to this. It's one of the potential victories for classical liberals to claim in the future, much like we are able to say that we are intellectual descendants from the abolitionists, the women's suffragists, from those who began arguing for LGBT rights and for the end to the drug war before everyone else who's now on board with that is saying. But it does require libertarians to recognize that we need to have introspection as to what has been said, what has been the main arguments by some of the luminaries, and what's been done with that. And there's an opportunity for us. And conscious capitalism offers libertarians a way forward with that, and a unifying way that can bring people together, especially in times that are incredibly divided, and we need to bring people together more than ever before.
That's a great place to end it, Alex. That was exceptionally good, I have to say. And, you know, the current events definitely point to what you're saying. When you see the divisiveness that the duopoly brings to the world, that does not work. And it just only becomes two parallel lines off by 1 degree, and look at how far off they are today. So there you go. One thing, what is compelling, what you've described, I've met many of your progeny from the Students for Liberty organization, and the future, I always thought, after I've met those kids, like, boy, the future is extremely bright. And just like you, as being thinking of a lone wolf, it isn't all so much about quantity as it is about quality. And the kids that I see that come out of that thing, those are the ones that are go make something happen. The rest are looking for the handout or whatever else. So you weren't going to get to them anyway. So it's very exciting to see. And you're right. You know what Ian drew you, and I was similarly compelled. But it was almost like it was a starting point. You know, they just knew what was wrong within their era, and now we've got the luxury of living on all of the fruits of the labors that they helped lay down. So we have the latitude. You know, it's in other countries where all you're worried about is somebody going to have water today. You don't worry too much about the environment. But when you can start to worry about the environment all day long, you must be doing pretty well that you got time on your hands. And so this is the next iteration that you're describing. And if you harken back, look what Henry Ford did. He raised the pay so that the workers could buy the cars that they were building. So it's no different in that respect. But, you know, you always see the horror stories, like I working at Amazon, living in this car and stuff. That's not a working model. That's going to create dissension within your ranks inside your company, and then it doesn't foster growth in the country. So part of the luxury of this COVID, and even with this particular president, things moving back to America, now there's going to be a chance for people to have jobs in a better way than we've seen in a long, long time, for sure. So that was really very good. I do appreciate it. And we've got a bunch of hands up, so let's get into it. David, I see you got your hand up.
Alex, this is David Demarest with Roads to Freedom in Omaha.
Hi,
I read Atlas Shrugged back in 1962. So over the years of thinking about Rand's philosophy and libertarianism, and thinking about the nature of man, and in fact the nature of reality and free market capitalism, I came up with a new term. And with your inspiration today, I've added 1 C to it. I call it the 3 C's, and that is conscious, collaborative, competition, which I see as making lives better by offering a needed product or service, which, by the way, happens to make a profit too, which is also a service to mankind. So your thoughts on conscious collaborative competition.
I love that. And I especially love that for some people, collaborative competition is going to sound like an oxymoron, even though it can actually be reinforcing. Too often, I still have people say to me, conscious capitalism, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? And it's about educating people that there is actually a synergy between them. And, you know, so often I think we see the division in the world today because people get too caught up in slogans, catchphrases, and titles, don't get into the real depth of an issue. And something provocative like conscious collaborative competition so hopefully sparks conversation to have deeper conversations and can bring people together, because we need that more than ever. And we need to get away from people being so tied to particular titles and tribes and instead work with each other. I mean, that even gets back to the underlying principle of libertarianism, and certainly the one that drew me to the philosophy, which is it's about people helping each other out and voluntarily doing so and figuring out the best way to engage each other with respect and dignity. And that's what it's really all about.
Kishore? Are you there?
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, sorry, 1 minute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is about intentions and outcomes. When you talk about the higher purpose, there is always a risk that intentions and outcomes don't quite square. So if you take conscious capitalism, Mackey did well. I mean, he created this whole market for organic food and changed the rest of the market in a very competitive way. But when you come to Larry Fink, he has elicited a lot of skepticism because he seems to be speaking more like a oligarch. So he's telling other companies how they should conduct their business. And he's apparently making decisions on the behalf of his investors in his funds of what is the best way to use that money. And it all seems like grandstanding. He's not really taking the risk of not complying with fiduciary responsibilities. And you know, a lot of people feel it's destructive, and it's an exercise of monopoly power. So it seems like, you know, you have to define conscious capitalism more carefully. And the market context should be clear.
Thank you, Kishore. This is a really important point. And this is one of the things I'm going to draw a clear distinction in between conscious capitalism and other efforts that people have mistaken it for in the past, corporate social responsibility. Because back in the 90s and early 2000s, corporate social responsibility was the hot thing that people were talking about. The idea being that businesses need to give back to society, they've got to be philanthropic, they've got to undo the damage they've caused. And a lot of businesses jumped on that bandwagon really to greenwash what they were doing. They were trying to throw money at things to cover up their actual bad actions. And as they did it, they bought into this underlying philosophical point that business is fundamentally bad and needs to give back to make up for its wrongs. And conscious capitalism is different from that. It is not CSR, because we don't start from the premise that business is bad. We start with the premise that business is fundamentally good. And the way businesses should be giving back to society is through their productive work. It's not what they say, it's not some philanthropic effort or a marketing ploy. It's they serve all of their stakeholders in such a way that their stakeholders are raving fans of what they're doing because they get so much value from it. And again, this is what business is all about at the end of the day. It's making people better off, and everyone saying, I'm engaging in this transaction because I'm better off. And what we've seen in conscious capitalism that's differentiated us from CSR in terms of the lack of greenwashing so far, at least within our movement, is that it's not just a statement. It's not just putting some money towards a cause. It really is about the way the business fundamentally operates from the beginning, and the way that each stakeholder it interact with it perceive it and actually benefit from it. That's not to say there isn't this risk of greenwashing and conscious capitalism's movement as well. It's something that we are on the lookout for, that we are vigilant about. But the fact that it has to be integrated into everything a business does, and the fact that we don't do certifications, people aren't looking to just check off a list of boxes to be able to say they're a conscious capitalist business. What they're doing is putting out there publicly, both to their stakeholders and to the rest of the conscious capitalism movement, here's our higher purpose. Here's how we're benefiting all of our stakeholders. Here's the work we're doing with our leadership and with our cultures. And they're opening themselves up to examination and criticism, and not just criticism, hopefully, but also hopefully the support of others to do better. It requires them to be open in a way that it makes it more difficult for them to be pretenders here. Larry Fink, I think, putting his statement out there was doing an incredible thing in putting it out there. That was so radical when it came out 2 years ago. And there are certainly things that we can talk about where they may not be living up to what's in that letter with investments yet. I think there's no such thing as a perfect business. And I don't know Larry Fink personally. I can't speak to his actual underlying motivations. But the underlying question really is, how do we help more businesses move down this path and act in a conscious way, instead of just trying to find ways to poke at them or make it easy for them to be able to just put out statements and do nothing else. And here's another way to think about this that's really interesting. When the Business Roundtable came out with its new statement on the purpose of the corporation last year, I don't think they understood how big of an impact that was going to make. I think they realized after it came out and after it got so much media attention that they put themselves out there in a way that they couldn't walk back from. And they have faced criticism lately, the businesses that signed that letter, for not doing enough on those areas. But the thing is, they're now being held to a higher standard than they were before they put that commitment out there. Larry Fink is now being held to a higher standard than before. And there's an opportunity for them to move in the right direction, for other stakeholders to push them in that productive direction that wouldn't have been available if they didn't make those statements. And that's really exciting to me.
One thing cool about that too is the fact that as we move more towards an automated world, there's going to have to be a place for people to function. And if you haven't built a fabric for them to fit in, they're just going to be displaced. That's going to get things far worse. As people have questions, please raise your hand. There's a little raise hand icon. I see that, not needless to say, Charles has a question.
Thank you, Jeff, and great talk, Alex. Is it possible to have a nuanced view of this, to, on the one hand, appreciate that deeper explanation of Ayn Rand's virtue of selfishness, which, sure, has a title that's provocative and off-putting, perhaps, while also appreciating the hope of the phrase conscious capitalism? That's kind of the first question. Does it have to be an either or? And then secondly, have you seen through experience in your position some risk of being dragged into coercive solutions to get to these conscious goals versus staving off the coercive aspects while at the same time encouraging voluntary adoption of better workplace environments, which is going to face your members and everyone as people demand more telecommuting options, more honoring of systemic discrimination that has been the cause of some of the recent protests. Do you understand that kind of question? The first one is, do you have to reject the strident libertarianism to accept conscious capitalism? And then secondly, is there a risk of conscious capitalists being guilted into adopting some of the woke, coercive solutions to some of the acknowledged problems? Does that make sense?
I think so. Let me try to answer them, and you tell me if I'm not. On the first one, is it an either or with regard to Rand and others in the libertarian movement, and how, whether there can be a nuanced view? I think in an ideal world, we should be able to have nuanced views on every issue, because there are very few issues that are actually simple. They're all very complex. And one of the things that I loved about being in a philosophy program about the libertarian movement too, is that there was so many rich, deep conversations that happened within there, which was awesome. But unfortunately, we're at a place where those deep conversations don't happen. If it isn't 140 characters or less, people aren't engaging it. And if the headline of something is selfishness is a virtue, you've lost them. And now look, I'm not going to tell other people what to do here. I'll just say from my experience, I've come to realize that I don't want people to misunderstand me because of a label or because of a title of something that doesn't fully represent what I believe. And that's happened far too often. So I don't know how to get to that nuanced, complex position yet. It's something that I'm personally striving to get to, but for me, that's required doing things differently than I did before, and also really rethinking what it means as well. Because you know what, I think Rand had a more complex view, but at the same time, I think she got a lot of things wrong. I think she was wrong about that. I also think Friedman was wrong to say that the social responsibility of business is to maximize profit. The meaning of profit is very specific, and there are lots of business people that can and do maximize profit without creating value for others. Because in a theoretic, if you accept all of a certain list of assumptions about what profit means, which is what Friedman was doing, then he's right. If you just say profit means value creation, but that's not what it means in the real world. It's a financial accounting metric, and there are lots of ways to get to profit without creating value for others. And capitalism is about creating value for others. Profit is a tool to help understand how what we're doing there, but it's not a perfect one. It's got flaws, and we need to look beyond that. And it's a difficult tension, especially when you start to think about how you get to that nuanced view instead of a surface level statement. And each of us has to figure out the best way to try and navigate that. Go ahead, Jeff.
Finish. I thought you were done there. I was going to let Ed Kless jump in for a minute.
Oh, well, I believe there was a second question too about coercive versus uncoercive efforts to form businesses. And this is one of the other things that is great about conscious capitalism, is that it's capitalists creating solutions to problems without needing to resort to coercive tactics. I will say systemic racism is a problem, not just in the political sense, but in social settings as well, and in business, and needs to be addressed. Something that we are looking at across our network right now and talking with our businesses about what they're doing, trying to find best practices for how they're tackling this, and helping them introduce new practices that they haven't done before with this. We do not have all the answers. I've got a lot of work to do on it personally as well, but we're working with them on it, and I think it's important to do that. And so I'll answer that slightly differently as well and tie my personal experience in with this as well. Ever since I moved out of DC, I live in California now, and began working for conscious capitalism, started to move outside of the libertarian movement. I started to realize, appreciate, and really enjoy the complexity of human life beyond politics. There's so many things that we get to do as human beings outside of the political world, and so many people that don't engage politics whatsoever in their lives. They don't care about it. They've got other things they want to do. They're doing yoga. They are surfing. They are running their own small business and don't know anything about politics. And that's great. That's the ideal that they should get to, where they can live lives like that. That's what I actually think. I personally think that's ideal. I think that's amazing. And that doesn't mean they don't have problems to work with, that there aren't social things they need to work on. That there's a way to say there's some things that the government should do and needs to fix, and there are things to fix with government. And there are a whole lot of things that human beings need to fix and society needs to fix on its own, and business needs to play a critical role in driving that. And we need to embrace that, and business leaders need to welcome and embrace that in particular, because they have so much influence over society and so many people's lives. That is one of the great challenges and opportunities for being a business leader today.
Good response. Ed, are you there still?
I am just hoping that you can hear me okay. I think there's
Perfect.
a Fortnite tournament. There's a Fortnite tournament going on in the house, as I'm pretty sure. But hey, great presentation, Alex. I'm a big fan of Conscious Capitalism. Have read the book. I love the analogy that is used in the book about profits being like red blood cells, and that we don't wake up in the morning thinking, okay, red blood cell production today is on our to-do list, but it's the result. It's not the cause. And wanted to share one other analogy that I think might be helpful to this group that I think I came across in Nassim Taleb's book, where he says we look at the giraffe and we don't think, well, the purpose of a giraffe is to get a long neck, but we see that all giraffes have long necks. And I think the same thing is also true of businesses and profit. The ones that survive, the giraffes that survived, had the long neck because they could get to the leaves at the top of the trees. The ones that survive in business are the ones that turn profit over time. So there's the ones that we see. And I think that's one of the big problems is that people in business see businesses that are profitable and that must be what our purpose is, because see, all of the successful businesses have profits. But we miss the fact that there's something deeper there. And the last thing I'll just comment on and then ask you for your commentary on this is I believe that it's only entrepreneurial businesses that can possibly do this. The biggest challenge that I see is when large organizations start to focus on exclusively efficiency over innovation and really on status quo and preserving market share versus growing and versus innovating, I should say specifically, that's the moment that they really begin to die. And I think that's another message that your movement brings out there. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ed. I think you're dead on with those. They're great analogies. And I'll add this as well. I think one of the biggest problems that happened to business was the over-economization of the concept of business. And this was one of the other slides I didn't get into before, but just neoclassical economic theory looks to quantify as much as possible with business. And that means they look for lowest common denominator for what they're able to quantify to compare everything. Profit is a great tool for that. And you know what? It's not bad. It's actually pretty good for that. Profit works well, but it's not all encompassing. And it can't be revered as the only thing that matters or the end goal just because it's the easiest thing to look at, even if it's not everything we should be looking at. And when you talk to even if you look at economics classes and the way they even teach microeconomics, the business entity itself is a black box. We have these inputs, a black box turns it into profit. And that misses the human nature of business and everything that's interesting and important about a business. It's not a black box. It's a group of people working together and doing things with each other. And that overemphasis on the economic structure to be able to model and write academic papers on and so forth, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's not all business is. And conscious capitalists are really emphasizing that human element and trying to undo the idea that each business is a black box to create profit, because it's so much more than that.
Christian, I see you
Thanks.
had your hand up.
Yeah, so my question, I guess, is I see this as an affront on the billionaire class to some extent, or I perceive that that's how they would see it. And it seems like something that they wouldn't take kindly to. So I'm wondering if you've experienced any backlash for this type of thinking, and whether you feel like this is a natural progression or something that's going to take more active effort and education and spending to bring to fruition on a large scale.
It absolutely is going to take more effort and spending to bring to fruition on a large scale. We are actively working on that, and we're a nonprofit. We look for support in order to be able to do that. But, and there are many other efforts out there working on this too. I actually just had a call. I was at a virtual retreat earlier today, a coalition of like-minded organizations all working in the same general space, which is an amazing group. And there are many others out there working on this too. But, you know, we actually see people looking at conscious capitalism from both directions when it comes to billionaires. That some people think it is an affront on them, it's a criticism of people being super wealthy, and some people see us as just being apologists for the wealthy class instead of, you know, tearing it down or something like that. When conscious capitalism actually doesn't take a stance on that. We don't say if a business is good or bad by being large or small, or someone is good or bad because they have a lot of money. That is a side issue. And we are more focused on we're more focused on the productive process itself, whether people are creating value for other people. And sometimes there are people who create a ton of value for other people and don't get paid at all for it. And there are some people who do. And there are some people who have exploited and engaged in illegitimate transactions enough to become wealthy. But that's a whole different process from, I would even say, capitalism, and certainly conscious capitalism.
Very nice. David, I see you have your hand up.
Let's applying your concept of the purpose of business and extending it, if you're willing, to the purpose of the Libertarian Party. Most libertarians today believe that the purpose of the party is just to get libertarians elected. A minority, however, echo the David Nolan original founder notion that the Libertarian Party was intended not as a political machine, but as a freedom flag to rally around. Any thoughts on that comparison?
So I will just provide, you know, a comparative analysis is how I'd recommend looking at that, taking a business look at it. What is the comparative advantage of the Libertarian Party versus the other groups that are out there? And back in the day, there weren't many organizations out there, so I think that made sense, or that could have made sense. There are a lot of other organizations out there doing educational work now. So is that the comparative advantage of the Libertarian Party? And that's something for leadership there to decide amongst themselves.
Interesting point there for sure. Well, sadly, we're reaching the end here. We got time to squeeze in one last quick question. I need a quick answer back. Kishore, what have you got for me?
Yeah, I mean, so I want to drill down on your point about black box, the firm being looked at black box. Well, economics actually has advanced beyond that. Ronald Coase, for example, looks at the firm, and he has this whole theory about transaction costs, which encompass, you know, the state of institutions which lead to higher transaction costs and so on. And there's a larger point about the circumstances in which the market fails. I mean, the telecom industry at one time was believed to be natural monopoly, but it's highly competitive now. So if you change the parameters of the market in which firms operate, I would think the higher purpose is served, because, you know, the telecom industry today, or the IT industry overall, is dramatically improving the quality of life. So is it, your human philosophy that matters, or is the marketplace which achieves this higher purpose? That's the question.
So if I understand you correctly, what I want to say is that this is actually another great example of the need for nuanced positions and the difficulty of getting there, because I can understand why what I said before may have come off as though economics is bad and economics just thinks this one thing about business. It is much more complex. There are a lot of brilliant economists out there doing important work. But what I want to call attention to is that there is a tendency to over-economize, and there are still a lot of prominent thinkers in economics that do treat business as a black box, or that's one approach to it. And that's a flawed way of looking at business, that we do need a more human element to it. And I think actually that human element doesn't just apply to business, it applies to the market as a whole. The concept of a market is an abstraction for the group of all individuals that are engaging with this. It's like a society is an abstraction of a group of individuals, or even a business is an abstraction of a group of individuals. It all comes down to human beings working with and serving other human beings in different structures. And as you pointed out, Coase articulated very well, the only difference in the way that's structured between a business and the market is how do we make it easier for people to engage one another in different ways? And one of the fascinating things about the 21st century is that we're seeing you don't need to create corporations in order to eliminate those transaction costs in the same way that you needed to in the early 20th century. So that there are more independent contractors out there now. There are more people that are engaged in a diversity of projects and establish corporations for short periods of time that dissolve after they fulfilled a purpose nowadays, unlike back in the day when they were just trying to exist forever. And it's interesting to see how those human to human dynamics are changing and how that changes the way that businesses work and the market works as a result. And that's what this all is at the end of the day.
Jeff, Charlie here. If I could ask Alex, give us a insight into the minds of some of your principal CEOs helping you run conscious capitalism, like Whole Foods John Mackey or others. What do they see as the vision for your organization going forward the rest of the year or in the future?
Our vision is to get to a place where conscious capitalism is redundant, where capitalism means conscious capitalism. And that's going to be a while until we get there, or at least I've thought that's the case. And I'm hoping I'm wrong, because this is accelerating a lot more quickly than I even expected, as I said before. And the way that we're getting there is by building a movement of business leaders that are actively changing the practice and perception of capitalism to elevate humanity. It is still a long road ahead for us, but we're making progress. And we can get to that place. We're going to have a much stronger, more flourishing, incredible world before us.
Sounds pretty exciting to me. I can't wait. Really appreciate you spending some time with us today. We certainly want to continue to visit again and see how things proceed. We'll have a lot more exciting things to report. Real quick before we dart out of here, just as a little treat here, I found out we've got somebody on here that actually had a little experience. I got a little chat here that's had some experience with this particular stuff we were talking about before. Christian, were you there?
Sorry?
Were you there? I wanted to kind of get a little feedback. You were telling me before about your experiences with this particular Heaven Sent hemp.
Yeah, so I was given a sample of one of their products called CHT Plus, and it's a product that's not to, as you see, reduce pain, anxiety, promote better sleep. It's actually to promote increased energy and wakefulness. So I was given this sample and I was trying it out, and I've had a heck of a time taking it beyond probably noon and getting to sleep before like midnight. Just out of a curiosity, I started trying this stuff, and it seems to really work better than I ever expected. So
that was interesting, Christian. It's neat that you were there, and that's one of the reasons why we were excited to have this be a sponsor. Also, we, as another sponsor, because we didn't mention this, is we also have been bringing more cash patients to the market with one of our partners here with the WOW platform, and also the program itself has received recognition in Forbes. So you're going to want to learn more about that too, and we'll be talking about that in coming times as well. So thanks for everyone for being here today.